consistent with what the country will be able to withstand. And no, we're not reconsidering franking credits and these sorts of things. I mean, ultimately, when we come out the other side of this, then obviously we're going to have to address the many challenges that we've taken on. One of the important principles, though, Shane, that we've put in place is to ensure that the measures are temporary and they do not provide long tails of expenditure. Now, as we know, and it's an observation, it's not intended as a criticism, it's just learning from history. When we went through this last time, there were long tails on expenditure, and there were structural changes to expenditure. There are not structural changes here. Whether it's what the Minister for Education, Dan, has just outlined to you, or what the Attorney General was outlining in terms of industrial relations, there is a snapback. There is a snapback to the previous existing arrangements on the other side of this, and so there is an intensity of expenditure during this period, and then we have to get back to what it was like before, and then we have to deal with the burden that will be carried out of this period of time. And on the last matter, we'll put the freezers in place. Yep, here, and then we've got 1, 2, and I think there was one up the back, and then we'll have to call it quits.
PM, do you think it's time the banks cut their dividends now, as they've been forced to do in New Zealand this morning? And also, secondly, is there anything the federal government can do to incentivise state governments to pass on land tax waivers to landlords to help them with their negotiations with tenants?
Well, on the first one, it's a matter that's been considered by the Council of Financial Regulators, and that's not a move that has been decided at this point or has been considered necessary at this point. And I'm aware of the decision of New Zealand agencies. At this point, the Australian government, and in particular through our financial regulators, we have not received that advice to move to that level. When it comes to dealing with the tenancy issues, this has been a key focus of the work of the National Cabinet over the last week or so. And I want to thank, whether it's the retailers groups, the landlord groups, the banks and others, they've all been engaging very constructively in how we can deal with this very difficult issue of particularly a retail tenant in the majority of cases, who has had to either shut their doors or have had a significant reduction in their revenue. Now, they're obviously greatly assisted by the two measures we've most recently put in place, both the JobKeeper arrangements, but also the cash flow arrangements we put in place prior to that, which can provide up to $100,000 to these businesses. But there will be quite a significant disruption to that normal tenancy arrangement. And what we are seeking to do, working with the states, is to ensure that there are the appropriate incentives in place for landlords and tenants to get together, particularly those who are under great stress. Anyone who's part of the JobKeeper program is already defined as that. And I would urge landlords and tenants to work this out. They're going to need each other on the other side. They're going to need each other they're going to need the premises, and the landlord's going to need the tenant. And so they need to, I tell you what the great incentive for a landlord is. If that tenant goes bust and can't pay rent, then they've got no one paying rent, and they'll be looking for a tenant in a very bad market 6 months from now. So my advice to landlords is sit down with your tenants and work it out. Yep, right up the back.
A question for the Education Minister. How will these measures announced today affect after-school services? A lot of providers have already closed given learning going online.
Those after-school services will be able to look at these new measures that we've put in place, and if they can start up, then we would encourage them to start up. Can I also say there is also measures as part of this for those offering vacational care. The way that arrangement will work is that we will go back to the Term 3 holidays of last year and look at what payments were made there over those vacational period, and then we'll be able to offer assistance to those who are offering vacational care. And can I just say one other thing, and it goes to what the PM was talking about, what he's talking about with his families. There are a lot of parents out there at the moment, especially those that have Year 12 students who are contemplating what their VCE is going to look like this year and what that will mean for pathways into work, into vocational education into university next year. All the education ministers have this as the top of their next priority list. We wanted to deal with childcare. We want to deal with childcare regulation, which the states and territories have been very cooperative on. Our next thing is to look at what it means for VCE students. And can I say to all those VCE students out there and their parents, this is the next on our list of priorities. Obviously, there are numerous issues that families are facing, but this is one I'm getting a lot of feedback which is of concern, and we will be addressing this in the coming weeks.
I understand that you say there is no health risk in sending kids to school, but there is some conflicting advice from the states. Gladys Berejiklian said for practical purposes, keep your kids at home. So in that case, who should parents listen to? Should they send their kids to school?
Gladys Berejiklian in the same press conference said that the health advice said it was safe for children to go to school. So my simple point was the health advice has been very clear, and the New South Wales Premier has made that point. Now, since that time, I mean, this is a rapidly evolving situation, and Dan just made the point that the groups of ministers around the country are dealing with these issues like a production line of issues that they need to address day in, day out. And where we are at now at schools is many of them are already moving to distance education, but no child is going to be turned away at a public school or at a private school if that's what their parents need for them to be there. And so parents can make common sense choices based on their own arrangements. Schools will be doing the same, and I think that's the best way to approach the situation. Now, we've got one more up the back, and then we'll have to call it a day.
On childcare, Minister, I just want to ask about that 50%, pegging it at 50% of the pre-coronavirus daily fee cap. By doing that, even when you take into account the JobKeeper payment on top of that, there's going to be a reduction in revenue to these childcare centres from before the coronavirus crisis struck. So do you accept that there is still going to be staff losses from within the sector, and what can be done for those people?
No, what we're doing is we're completely recalibrating the way the childcare sector will operate, and what you can't do is compare apples with oranges. And if you look at the data, and when you put JobKeeper in there, our view is that we are providing additional support to the sector, and that in providing that additional support to the sector, what we're saying to them is we want you to remain open, and we want you to prioritise those essential workers, and as the PM has said, that's anyone who's out there working, those vulnerable children, and then to look at re-engaging with those who have taken their children out of the sector.
Well, I want to thank everybody. The National Cabinet will meet again tomorrow. We'll be considering a range of matters. If there are issues to report on following that meeting, then we'll do that under the normal arrangements. Thank you all very much.
So that's an update from Canberra.